Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of our AI Momentum series here at Lantern, getting started with agents. Really, the theme that we have for this series is about helping your organization unlock key AI capabilities, moving beyond proof of concepts, those kicking the tires, and really about scaling AI value. I am so pleased to welcome to the episode today, Soumya Bhatt. Soumya, would you please take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Hi, guys. My name is Soumya Bhatt, and I'm a partner technology strategist here at Microsoft. I'm based out of New York, and I work with our enterprise partners like Lantern here on everything that they're building on the Microsoft cloud, and also bringing together joint solutions such as the one that we're going to talk about later in the series. So really excited to meet all of you guys and have our discussion today.
Awesome. Thank you and welcome, Soumya. My name is Jeremy Bierlein. I'm a principal technology strategist here with Lantern. I'm coming to you live today from our Denver office. I'm out of Minneapolis. And my goal as a principal technology strategist is to engage with our clients across industries and come alongside them and work with them regardless of where they are in their data, AI, and technology transformation journey. So I enjoy the opportunity to hear from all of you about where you're at and to host these conversations to really give you something actionable to leave with. For today's episode, we're going to start the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. So we're going to do a little bit of what makes an agent an agent. Soumya is going to talk a little bit about some high value use cases for agents. There's a lot across industries. If we don't mention your industry, raise your hand in the Q&A at the end and we'll gladly talk about it. We're going to talk about 3 different on-ramps to getting started with agents, which is really our theme for today's call. The first one is buy. And when I say buy, it means somebody in your organization has signed up for this. There are agents that Microsoft is delivering to you right now that you can start using right now, or maybe soon if you bug your IT department. Configure, this is where you can look and say, what are some opportunities for you to start playing with building your own agent? Microsoft offers some great tools, whether you're a citizen developer or maybe somebody in a technology organization that's looking for ways to enable your businesses with their use cases. And then build is really about these enterprise grade agents. So things that are your business's secret sauce and your differentiator. We'll talk a little bit about some great research from Microsoft on the future of work or on how agents might reshape the human side of organizations in terms of how we organize and execute work, and then leave you with some really concrete suggestions based on what we've covered today on actions to take with agents. And then we'll have a Q&A. If you have questions as we go along, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand. Joe will make sure we get flagged down, so may I. And we really love for this to be a dialogue. As a heads up, there will be polls. If you've been around here before, there is an audience participation. These polls are incredibly useful for us as your presenters to make sure we're actually talking about things that you want us to talk about and that we better understand where all of you are coming from, in this case, with your journey with agents. So just be ready. Those will pop up here as we go ahead and go through the content. Super high level. It wouldn't be a presentation without a big numbers slide, right? IDC, the IT analyst firm, projects that there'll be 1.3 billion AI agents out in the world accomplishing real things by 2028. Now, I may think that number is a little bit low based on all the different ways that we're talking about today about ways to get started with agents. So this will be a really fascinating benchmark to watch. But the reality is that some of that same research, this is from Microsoft and the organizations we work with, while Lantern works with really some AI forward thinking organizations, the reality is even organizations that are pushing hard on integrating AI into their transformation of their business. If you think about this journey as these 5 stages of maturity, the majority of organizations are still in 2-3 or 3-4. It takes a lot to be 5, which is that repeatability at scale with delivering AI value. Short answer is if you're in the middle of this and you're thinking this is hard, it is, because it's hard. Episode number 1, if you want to go back in the playlist, talked about some of those barriers that we see in organizations moving from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, for example. So, first poll of the day, didn't say I didn't warn you. How familiar are you with agents, and do you use AI agents daily? So, Joe, if you would pop the quiz here. All right, is everybody submitting their votes? Let's take a look. This is excellent. Interestingly enough, and I know some votes are still coming in, what we're seeing here mirrors that larger maturity curve that we were just talking about in terms of organizations beginning to say, I'm starting to integrate parts of AI into my daily work and into my business processes and other things like that. So thank you for this. This is really helpful. I'm really curious to see, for those people who are saying that they are using both AI and agents at 15% of our votes, I'd love to hear from you as we go along. 101 content. What makes an agent an agent? An AI agent is different because ultimately it's goal-driven and to varying degrees autonomous. So that means agents can plan, decide, and take actions all within the scope of control that you decide to set for them. They'll do this in multiple steps. This is called reasoning. And so one of the things you'll see in the demos today where we talk about some of the agents available to you from Microsoft is a goal of a good agent is to be very transparent with its reasoning, for example, and with minimal human input. This is really one of the other differentiators that we'll talk about today and we'll keep coming back is the difference between hitting a large language model or using Copilot, for example, to put in a prompt, get a response back. This begins to say how many more steps of a process can an agent do all by itself? And then when we think about different types of AI, the good news is they're complementary. Many of us have experienced AI. Maybe we've experienced it as something predictive, like it begins to say, hey, look, based on this, something else is likely to happen. Or things like image recognition. Traditional machine learning is really good at pattern recognition, for example. All of that's incredibly valuable. One of the use cases we'll talk about later is how agentic AI can build on traditional AI. But agentic is different, especially when you see that sort of loop back. You'll give it a goal. It will go and try and go after that goal. I just watched one of my agents bounce back and say, well, that didn't work. And in my case, it basically was struggling to find something based on a particular industry term. And it switched terms and said, hey, this is actually a synonym. And it actually found more information. I was able to do that somewhat independently. So really, when you think about the processes that you have that you can begin to really define or have some boundaries around, this agents are really that opportunity. We have a bunch of our recent early career folks in the office today, and they love agents because they're as curious and excited and ready to go after it as they are. So again, traditional AI, relatively linear, trained on a specific thing. Agentic AI wants to go after the problem, and depending on its scope, its capability, its field of integration within your organization or connection to the internet, it will go and try and solve that to the best of its ability. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about some of the use cases that you've seen bubbling up as you've worked across Microsoft with clients?
Yeah. And I want to point out first, as you were talking about agents, what we're seeing in the industry and with our customers is agents existing on a spectrum. Depending on where a company is in their AI transformation, we're seeing some very advanced autonomous agents that are being built, but we're also seeing some of the more traditional use case where it is a information retrieval and then task completion sort of process. And so I kind of want to talk about the spectrum of what we're seeing. And from an industry perspective, we just kind of pick 3 industries. This is what we're seeing where some of the high impact, high value use cases are. And you can think of them in terms of short-term wins and long-term, more strategic use cases. So I'll just pick a simple example to begin with. So this is a customer inquiry Q&A agent that you might want to build. And it's showing up under the financial industry vertical, but of course, this is probably a common use case. for a lot of industries where you may have a need for employees to be able to have policy questions that they want to have answered. So in this example, you might want to build an agent that has a knowledge base, which contains your internal policy documents, your product manuals, training guides, whatever it is, as the source of information. And then an employee would come in, they would ask their question. As an example, maybe I want to know about holiday. What is the policy around a specific holiday? So an employee would ask that question, and the agent would understand the intent of the employee as well as the role that they had. And based on the intent and the role, which tells me the permissions that they would have in that knowledge base of information, it will determine how to answer that question, and then it accurately retrieves and responds with the required information. So this is a very simplistic Q&A, task-oriented sort of scenario, but that's still a very common agent that we see today. And of course, from a business outcome perspective, you're going to have much faster responses than sending emails to someone in HR, doing a search, and you don't know where that document is. So it'll be a lot faster. And then you're getting accurate, trusted answers from this vetted knowledge base that you've decided for this purposes. So that's sort of like a simple agent. Another common one that you might have would be a claims settlement agent, as an example. The traditional processes might be that you have a bunch of manual intake that needs to happen about the claim, and then you've got these fragmented systems that are where the data is housed, or where you're piecing together what needs to happen based on what the claim is, and then someone is manually trying to read and figure out how to respond to that claim. If we want to take the agentic approach to the system, we want to extract the claim data automatically. We want to be able to, based on the pattern of information, potentially detect if there's anomalies or fraud that we want to flag. Based on the insights and data, figure out how you want to triage this particular claim. And then does it need to go through a approval process? How much of this can be decided by the agent? Is there some threshold or some types of things that the agent can determine, okay, in this case, I'm going to take this kind of action, and the agent figures it out? Or maybe in some situations, you want human in the loop. So you might want somebody to approve for this particular case. You want someone to come in and approve it before it moves further along the claims process. So again, using this agent framework, now we have automated a lot of the pieces. We are being proactive in being able to determine if there's frauds or patterns or some kind of insights that we get from the data. And then overall, hopefully we're having the customer have a better experience because claims are faster, more accurate. We're improving the fraud detection as well. So that's another example. And then I'll touch on a third one from the manufacturing use case. A classic scenario in manufacturing that you might have is being able to do predictive maintenance. So if you take a manufacturing company, traditionally you'll see that there's maintenance teams that might do some inspections periodically, and they might flag some things. But a lot of what's happening is post failure, some repairs are scheduled, and potentially that might lead to production stoppage, that, oh, hey, this thing is broken and now we can't continue to manufacture this product. So going from that to a more predictive model and to a more automated agentic type of model, we might have a system, an agentic system built in that is, again, going to have sensor data, historical data, all of that to be able to better forecast the maintenance schedules, or if something is in real-time conditions as things are changing, if it's able to detect action that needs to be taken to do these repairs ahead of time so they're not as costly, or has the ability to failures that might happen. So outside of the inspection schedules, that you're able to identify these problems earlier, and that way you have less downtime. You have less obstacles within your production process. Generally, you're avoiding costs that might be associated with having to reactively address some of these issues. So again, those are just some of the scenarios. We can touch on many different types of use cases, but the idea here again is that it gives you the ability to build something that is very specific to the process that you've defined for that business or persona and specific to the data that it should be looking at. And then it's doing these things in a automated way so that it's taking action on your behalf. And then in cases where you want human in the loop, where you want additional oversight from a human, you have the ability to do that as well. And overall, the result should be that you have better processes, better times, better customer experiences overall, and just many ways to improve the overall experience. Those are some of the cases that we're seeing, and I would love to hear from you guys as well, what you're seeing.
Yeah, I
And if
think these examples, you illustrated the spectrum beautifully, and you also teed up some of the examples we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. It's really where agents can be unleashed to the degree that you are ready, willing, and able and comfortable with them in terms of how much capability you want to give them over time to act on your behalf and orchestrate multiple things, just like you probably do every day at your job. Ethan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a question on, I get the agents there processing and it's going to take action, right? So it occurred to me, and this is one of the things I struggle with, is an agent versus integration. So in your first example, you talk about a policy. And so I'm just curious why you would need an agent in that regard versus if all your policies are in SharePoint, wouldn't Copilot find it and be able to answer that?
Yeah, so here's a couple of reasons. So one might be that with the agent, you're scoping it to a specific thing, right? I might be doing general searches when I'm using Copilot, but if I'm using an agent that's built for a specific purpose, like in this example, employee understanding policies, one, I will get potentially more specific answers. And then if I built my agent I could potentially build my agent with instructions to tell it how to deal with these kinds of questions coming from people. I could, as an example, just say that, hey, if they're in the financial department, they might be thinking about this, like potentially adding additional context or how I want it to respond. So if I do a general Copilot search, it's just going to give me, here's what I found. But if I create an agent that's scoped, and you might not need, in your use case, maybe you don't need it, but in the cases where you need it to have specific behavior, you have other things that you want to add as instructions that you want it to do, those are the times when you want to think of using an agent. And I illustrated that as an example because we do see that very commonly as a use case that customers are still using is these agents that on a high level, they're Q&A bots, but there might be very specific things in terms of where to look for the information, what information to consider, and then how to address it.
Integrations ultimately are the enablers of agents. If you think about a scenario where you do a search and then say, hey, by the way, your PTO balance is this, which the agent got that from your HRIS system like Dayforce. Or, hey, do you want to file a PTO, start a service now PTO request? That's where you begin to start saying, moving from traditional going against information to beginning to say, how can it help take action on your behalf? Because it has context and understanding. I saw a couple other questions pop up. Why don't we unpack the demos a little bit, and then we promise to get to them in the Q&A for sure. So 3 big buckets. We talked at the beginning, buy, configure, build. And so what we'll do is with the buy, we'll talk about agents in M365 Copilot. Configure, we'll talk about there's 2 flavors now of Copilot Studio and Copilot Studio Lite, which is the vibe code cousin of Copilot Studio, formerly known as Agent Builder. And then build, we'll give an example of sort of an industrial agent that is delivering a business differentiating or business critical function within an organization and building on previous data and AI investments. So why don't we go ahead and start, Soumya, with the agents that Microsoft is delivering right now through M365 Copilot?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. As Jeremy mentioned, where and how you build your agents, there's a spectrum of options that you have. And I'm going to start with M365 Copilot because that's the low code, least amount of technical expertise needed option. and you get a bunch of stuff out of the box. As we've talked about, M365 Copilot specifically is grounded in your work data. It has, for context, your emails, your chats, your meetings. So it has all of that information already built in. As an example, I use it daily for my preparing for meetings or getting action items for meetings, etc. So it's a great productivity tool. But then beyond that, agents is something that's augmenting Copilot by adding additional skills and knowledge so that you can further automate tasks in your business processes. So some of the agents that you get out of the box without doing anything is what you see on the screen here. I'll show two of them in a demo. So we've got Analyst, which is one of the ones I'll show you in a demo of. It's basically like a data analyst agent, and it lets you, given a set of data that you haven't really cleansed or put any context to in any way, it helps you reason through. Sorry, was there a question? So it lets you reason through that and do some analysis. We've also got the facilitator agent. That's something that we use in Teams. And that's, again, to manage your team's goals, agendas, note-taking real time. Then we've got Interpreter, which is an agent that's also built into Teams. And that's something that lets you do real-time conversion, language conversion. I've used it in the past in meetings where I'm trying to listen in to a meeting in another country. We also have a project manager agent, again, similar concept where from a project management perspective, it allows you to plan, create tasks, do tracking, status reports, etc. And then we also have Researcher, which we're going to see a little demo. And Researcher is an agent that is using advanced reasoning models and it's grounded in your work and web chat if both of those are enabled. And then it has the ability to do deep research that, again, you may have a researcher on your team do that. It's able to do that. So maybe I can start with looking at some examples, starting with the researcher agent. So this is the interface in Copilot to get to the researcher agent. So you can go select researcher, create a prompt. In this case, someone in product that wants to have a strategy for how to get their product in certain markets. So the prompt was just that. I don't know if you guys can read it. And then you can see researcher is going through and coming up with a plan on how it's going to address it. Before that, it also had some questions potentially that it asked to clarify. And then as it's working, you can see that list that's refreshing. It's showing you how it's thinking about things. So you can see how it reasoned through it. And at the end of it, which is the screen that you're seeing right now, is the report that it created. So it creates this very structured, thorough report based on your prompt. And throughout the process, it can ask you clarifying questions. You can make adjustments so that you get, again, better, accurate results. And then as it goes through the process, it does the research internally and the web, whatever is enabled in your tenant. And it comes up with this document that you can use, and it's structured in a nice way. You can use that as a report. So again, this is replicating what a human would do if you were asked to do research. And, it's different, as you can see, from traditional Copilot search where you're asking a question, getting an answer. In this case, you're doing deep research and it's using the deep reasoning models to do that. And then I want to quickly show you guys the analyst agent. So here we're using
I'm trying to understand our most loyal customers.
Okay, I think the audio is a mess. So in this example, you're looking at some data sheets about customer that have customer data. And I want to understand in this example, given this big, ginormous data sheet, I have a question and I want to do some analysis. So I would go to the analyst, pick that data sheet, and then ask a very generic question like, hey, can you help me understand the customer segmentation? Give me a visualization. So a very simple prompt. Normally, I would have to use Python or something else to write the code to do the analysis and come up with the visualization. But as you can see here, you just put that prompt and it's going through its reasoning to figure out what it needs to answer that question. If there's Python libraries or something else that it needs, it's going through all that. And this is showing you how beyond the reasoning, you can also see the Python code that it's applying to resolve and get to the answer. So that you can see it's giving you a visual representation for that analysis. So again, this is like having a data analyst at your fingertips. You don't need to know how to use any of the data analytics languages. You don't need to know Python. You can just ask it a question. You don't even need to clean the data. Just give it the Excel spreadsheet and you ask it a very question in natural language and it's doing all the analysis and giving you the report. So you can see how easy that was. And this is something that works out of the box. There's nothing that you need to do to be able to use this agent other than it being enabled by your admin.
So M365 Copilot, again, you need that version of Copilot. Depending on your organization, you may have the Copilot chat or other free versions. So check with that. Talk with your IT organization if you don't see the researcher and analyst agents. But again, the best way to think about these is these are for your first 60, 70, 80% of your work. That initial snap at research, being able to pull things together, do that analysis. And they are right there and they are individual, they're intended as individual productivity accelerators at the end of the day, working on your behalf and accelerating your workday. That's sort of the buy. Those hopefully are, if you haven't used them already and you have them available, go try them this afternoon. Now we'll talk about the configure and the option that you have if you want to begin playing with your own, creating your own agents, some of the options that are available to you.
So we think of Copilot Studio as the low-code citizen developer experience, and it's basically giving you a platform where you can manage the entire lifecycle of your agent. So from building the agent to managing changes and just managing as your ecosystem of agent grows, it gives you the platform to do everything. It also allows you to connect to external data. So by default, as I mentioned, it's already connected to your data in MS Graph, but you can also connect it to external systems. You might have another analytic system, Databricks, where you're bringing your data, or an ERP system like SAP. So you can connect all of those additional knowledge sources and you can bring those in. And you can use any number of models that we have, large language models that we have available on the platform. And you can bring your agents, quickly deploy them and build them. And once you've published your agent, you can deploy it on Teams or some of the other channels that are available. It gives you a very simplified way to manage and work on those as a low-code citizen developer. It also makes it easy for you to govern, do some level of governance. So if you share an agent, it'll make sure that the permissions that are applicable to the person that you're sharing with, that remains. So you're supposed to have access to some data. That's the only data that you're going to be able to interact with the agent on. It's just giving you a much more ability to build much more complex experiences. It also gives you like a visual designer, so you can have flows and different ways to build those agents. This is where we have a demo to show you how easy it is to build a no-code, just natural language agent. So as you can see, this is as it loads. So this is where you can build an agent on chat. So all you have to do is come up with a prompt for what you want your agent to do and potentially a persona. So there you can click and create an agent, write your prompt. You can also use one of the existing templates if you like. Otherwise, just go ahead and describe your prompt, potentially describe if you wanted to have a certain persona or a tone. You can have all those descriptions in here. The more instructions, the more specific you make it, the better it should work. And again, it's asking questions. And then here you can give it some sources of knowledge where you want it to look. You can also potentially enable code interpreter or image generator to be able to add to your agent. You have a lot of different options, and this is just building it out of chat without knowing how to code, just using natural language. You can quickly build an agent. So we'll let this run. Here, there, read it, and you can view it in Copilot. You can share it once it's been published. You can publish it in different channels. Teams is a common one. where we see the agents popping up. And there it also showed sharing an agent with a specific person.
So this is great. Going back to your question, Ethan, right? If you felt a need in an afternoon on a Thursday to go ahead and code a help desk, all of that information is sitting over there in a SharePoint site somewhere. Using Copilot Studio Lite, you're able to do that and deliver a proof of concept in just an afternoon. And will it be everything? No. Will it begin to say, oh, this is delivering value. Here's what we need. It will help you refine the use case and the ask from your business. Absolutely. So again, Copilot Studio Lite intended for folks in the organization to begin sandboxing and trialing out ideas. Copilot Studio, the next level up, it's powered a Power Platform. So if your organization does enable citizen development with things like Power Apps or Power Platform, Copilot Studio is in that same family and allows you to begin to do even more integrations. So the agent can then do tricks. You can also leverage the whole connector infrastructure. So pre-built connections to ServiceNow, SAP, Dayforce, all of these sorts of existing platforms. I think there's like 300 some right now. So you can begin to give your agents a pretty rich toolbox pretty quickly without custom coding or integrations. And then last, the pro code option.
Yes, this is the pro code developer experience, and this is where you have the most control. And this is where if your needs are not met by Copilot Studio and you have more custom use cases, this is where you would use AI Foundry. It's a developer platform where you can use any of your tools like GitHub, Visual Studio that you're already using and build your agentic applications end to end. You can use models. There's 11,000 plus models that we have in the catalog. And it basically gives you a unified place to do your development of the project and very quickly churn out agents. And in terms of the hosting in the Copilot Studio, it's hosting it for you. In the case of AI Foundry, you have the ability to choose where you want to host. So whether you want to deploy it to AKS, container apps, whatever, you have more control as you go more towards the pro code side. You have a broad spectrum. You probably want to start with Copilot Studio, test out your scenarios, and then if you find that it's not giving you what you need, you have the other option to do a even more flexible, customized version with AI Foundry. And for just basic, quick start things, you can do the no code option that we saw with chat, where you can just in a chat build out your agent very quickly. So that wraps up what we have in terms of the options.
Let's give an example of this build. And we talked about earlier how different types of AIs are non-exclusive and how they build on. So a customer of ours that we're proud to work with that you have probably run into on your travels, Unified, they basically will provide everything from fueling, catering, baggage handling, and a whole bunch of other services at the airport. They have a bunch of people, 25,000 plus people in motion every single day working in these sites. One of the things that they came to us is that obviously an airport is an incredibly dynamic environment and safety is, of course, the number one priority in that organization. We did some initial work with them where we helped consolidate some of this data together so it then could be actioned on. And then we worked with them to not only build reporting on it, but also begin to build predictive analytics. Again, more traditional AI. This is the machine learning model where you're training it on a bunch of data and then it would give a prediction of things that you should watch for. A phenomenal program that using these predictive reports, and these predictions, they were able to get ahead and saw a 20% reduction in safety issues on the tarmac, basically seeing strong accuracy, not a lot of false alarms out of these predictions. Like some of these were weather, some of these were staffing based. Some of these were even staffing seniority based. Hey, we have a new mix of people on the ground today. What does that look like? There was an opportunity to continue to get richer and richer. Now, as we thought about the future with them a little bit, one of the things we talked about is, hey, what could an agentic investment on top of this look like? We sort of built, let's call it an art of the possible future look to say, building on these investments, Unify, that you've already made, how could you begin to take this further and unlock these predictive insights and put them into better action on the day in and day out. What you're going to see here is a pop-up of a Teams alert. And what this is, instead of going to a static report in Power BI and seeing that prediction, it's actually coming to, in this case, a regional supervisor in Teams. Hey, high winds predicted in Phoenix today. Do you want to implement a wind safety plan? There's immediately, without going to another report, another application, an opportunity to get more context. There's also the opportunity, as opposed to just coming with the initial alert and a static set of information to help inform the decision, I'm now able to chat back and forth with its agent. And because it has access to a curated set of information, I can ask questions about, hey, what is the team looking like? Who's deployed on the ground today? What's their seniority? Other things like that help me make a more informed decision. And because the agent has access to that information, it's able to pull back and say, okay, great. Here's the information I have right now. And then with that, you're able to interact with it and basically say, okay, great. Now go put that into action here. And so what then happens is over on this, basically the location manager's instance of Teams, they get a safety card popping up, basically say, hey, this is tasking. Those of you who work in retail or any sort of operations, you get tasking. Teams has always been a great tasking platform. And so we now have this ability to easily go back and forth. And we've accomplished what was probably multiple experiences, maybe even phone calls or other things like that, quickly as a back and forth. This is just the beginning. Now, imagine a scenario where you continue to empower the agent. Maybe it's able to take after a period of time of vetting it, able to take certain actions, and it's going to proactively make a decision to issue a warning or execute a task or declare that something needs to happen. Again, integrations are the enablers and data are the enablers of agents at the end of the day. So there's the opportunity to continue to get an initial pass at an agent, see how, no pun intended, the airplane flies a little bit, and then continue to make refinements to it. And I think Soumya really was summing it up well. We've shown you 3 different options. And as we think about scaling agents, really, we started over on that buy side with this human augmentation, right? These are your personal assistants. It helps you with that first 60, 70, 80% of a task, right? But ultimately, there are only so many copilots as there are people in your organization. It's a one-to-one sort of relationships. Really, what agents begin to do is helping you get personal leverage within the organization and amplifying. This is an agent working on behalf of a process or an organization. And ultimately, the scaling opportunity, because it's not becomes more of a one-to-many relationships because of the increasing degree of autonomy you're going to give agents. So Microsoft has published the Future of Work research. They've done this every year. And really this year, one of the questions they wanted to ask with this research is, what will be the impact of agents? We've been talking about the impact of and virtual meetings and all this sort of stuff for years. Now let's talk about the impact of agents. And they're saying this journey to a frontier firm, spoiler alert, much like that maturity graph at the beginning, not many organizations are there yet. Many organizations are very early in this journey of even with this phase 1, this human with assistant, these copilots, these agents that are research or analysts that are embedded in M365 Copilot, coming up to this phase 2. So human-led agents, like a part of my job is taking help desk inquiries, right? Really simple example. You probably already have advanced help desk systems in your organization, but begin to say, where can I put an agent in the front line or the initial step of a process, leveraging all of the knowledge or in some cases connectivity that we've got. And then really phase 3 is where those of you who are leaders in your organization, it's becoming really this manager of agents who are increasingly doing more and more autonomously on your behalf. So it's about understanding and managing their efficacy, their efficiency, their alignment to company values and profile and tone of the organization. So this is, if you really look down the path here, this is the leaders in an organization having a mix of both people direct reports and agent direct reports at the end of the day. And the mindset shift that comes with that mix of a whole different variety of coworkers. So to recap, and then we'll go to Q&A here, agents are showing up across your organization. We've worked with many organizations that on their AI strategy, how they want to adopt things. This is a perfect example. If you have an AI strategy, to hit a refresh around agents, or if you don't have one, just catch up, and agents are here. Your organizations, we need to think through how we're going to adopt and absorb them. Number two, you already have agents in Copilot. One of the things we work with organizations to do is around a Copilot success plan. How do you drive adoption? How do you drive value out of the M365 Copilot investment you're making in your organization? With agents coming in, it's another blade in the Swiss Army knife. So how do you update your adoption plans to include that? Low-code citizen dev agents are here with Copilot Studio and Copilot Studio Lite. All of a sudden, a lot of IT organizations are like, this is great. Much like when I started unleashing Power Apps or Power Automate in an organization, how am I going to govern Copilot Studio when people start creating a whole bunch of agents? How do I put guardrails around that for safety and cost? And then lastly, this building of enterprise-grade agents with Azure, it's a rich toolbox. And so really what we continue to see with customers is that this is where the business differentiating, the secret sauce of your organization lives. In interest of time and getting to your questions, I'm going to skip this last poll. I saw at least one question in the comments. Feel free to start raising your hand. Joe, I'll ask you to keep track of who's in what order first. But I saw Chris dropped one into the chat here about how do you think about managing context for agents? I think what's really great is that on the buy and build options that we saw today, there's already, you can see some initial guardrails around context of the agent into your graph. By the way, this is another, what we saw with Copilot. This is another great reminder to organizations to think about data security and data governance on all of their file shares and other things like that. But again, with Copilot Studio, you can see in a low code sort of way, again, you're adding and subtracting to agent context two different ways. One, just by what you choose it to connect it to in your organization. But then the fact that those connectors respect those enterprise permissions that you've already set up in your organization and they carry through. You have some pretty granular context that comes amazingly just out of the box, leveraging the hard work you've already done. What I didn't show you in that built example that are the possible for Unify is when you go back into Azure AI Foundry and Azure AI Agent Service, you're actually doing quite a bit of context instantiation when you launch that agent experience. So even there, you have a wide range of control on things like tone, context, other things like that. I mean, I think we're all looking for history over time. Does your agent have a memory? And I think that what we're starting to see is that that is available within the built phase right now, if you consciously add it. And everybody's working to begin to add that into those buy and configure experiences. You can add explicitly in your built agents, shorter term or longer term memory. And I think you're continuing to see them in some of those other enterprise experiences in the buy and the build. Other questions? GPT-5 is available in M365 Copilot. And then just to answer your question, Chris, I just saw, I believe it was Sundar.
Oh, yeah, Jeremy. I was listening to this and at the back of my mind, one thought kept popping up. Okay. So I just wanted to get both of your opinion on it. Okay.
Yeah.
I see that with 1.3 billion AI agents by some time, you're going to be in a jungle. And we all know that navigating a path through the jungle will require its own set of agents. And so the question is, how do you manage this jungle? I kind of sense that there is a similar moment to an API jungle. People who remember those days would say that, hey, you need to be discoverable. And then God alone knows what discoverable means, So in this, any thoughts that you guys might have to say, guys, just make sure that yours is a little bit of a farm and not a jungle. Okay.
Yeah. I think it comes down to a couple of different things. I think in your what we're seeing is in your M365 environment, make sure you've thought about some of those guardrails just from a workplace perspective. I have seen just in the last several months, significant uptick in our customers. All of a sudden, much like the initial launch of generative AI features like Copilot made organizations all of a sudden look at all of their unstructured data, all those file shares. Are my permissions right? Who can see what? Oh, if I turn that on, who can see what? Are the permissions right? Now we're starting to see, with the demand for low code agents and low code AI, everybody's revisiting their sort of power platform governance. Like, how much do I enable people to do? Do I need to run someone through a training course and then give them basically an enterprise driver's license? If I'm in finance and raise my hand, I want to go build agents. Okay, great. Go through this training module and then we'll put you in there. Likewise, beginning to say, hey, what's the right tool for the right job? Maybe I start you in Copilot Studio Lite and give you a safe sandbox. And then here are the scenarios where you'd step up to Copilot Studio, or even maybe to a built AI solution if your use case is going to deliver that much value and is of that much import. So I think what we're seeing right now is it's still not the same level of maturity yet, where a lot of organizations have a relatively mature enterprise integration structure and approach and governance around all of that and tooling around that. We're still early in the agentic journey, but the things you can do right now are make sure that you're revisiting some of those. I know governance it's like fiber. It's not a lot of fun. It's not always the most compelling project to take to your leadership, but investing in it now will at least put some guardrails and help set expectations across your organization so that you are at least growing in the right direction and in a healthy and safe direction for the organization.
Yeah, and if I could add, so from a tooling perspective, there's some things that you get out of the box with the products that we have at Copilot Studio as an example. There's some management of the life cycle, but what we're also seeing a lot is that there are COEs that are being developed that are part of your AI strategy. This is addressing agentics for all as part of that. So having specific frameworks for the governance or your agents is going to be part of that AI strategy. And as Jeremy pointed out, and as Chris pointed out, that there's some mirroring to your data governance strategy. How do you manage the nomenclature of how they're going to be built per organization, group, whatever department? So all of those considerations are going to have to be part of some sort of frameworks. So we're seeing some of those emerge. We're seeing that people are adapting that as part of their overall AI strategy. This is one of the pillars, is managing the sprawl of agents and the strategy of who has access, how it's getting deployed, how's the lifecycle managed, all of those things.
Exactly. Other questions? Maybe we'll do one more because I know we're coming right up on time here.
Chris, who's on the chat, he's from Microsoft. He also put in a link to what we have as the Maybot framework, and that's a sort of an accelerator as you're going in your AI journey. It helps you figure out how you want to make investments. So it's a framework on how to make investments. That's what we have from the Microsoft side. So he's put that on the chat, but of course there's many other frameworks as well.
That's excellent. Well, with that, again, remember our takeaways here. If there are specific things that are connecting with you and your organization you'd like to discuss further, please reach out. A couple of just a housekeeping notes. You'll receive a follow-up email that will include links to a recording of this presentation. You'll also receive a place to download the presentation. November 4th, we go back and forth between these broad level topics and more specificity. One of my favorite and most challenging use cases with conversational AI is when you point it at a database. It is not as easy as a lot of your business stakeholders might think it is for AI to glean value out of that structured data. So Fabric data agents offer some amazing features and ability to move more quickly and deliver more value on that. If you're interested in that, be sure to sign up for our next AI Momentum series. Because you joined today, you'll get a reminder for that and all of the future episodes in our series. So if you have continued questions, again, here's Soumya's contact information. Here's mine. It's been our sincere pleasure to have you today. And thanks for joining. We'll also take a look back in the chat. And if there are any questions there, we'll try and reach out to you one-on-one to connect there too.
Thank you.
And with that,
guys.
have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Have a good one.